Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. I'm your host, Christian D. Evans. And guys, let me ask you this one question. What does Jimi Hendrix, James Dean, Elvis Presley, Abraham Lincoln, and Bob Marley all have in common? They did not have an estate or will planned prior to their death. So guess what happened? Well, they were shit out of luck. And see, I want you to understand something. There is never a moment in time where death is appropriate. Death happens. And the reality is, the reason why we're bringing this up is because you guys are all running successful businesses. You guys are scaling successful businesses. But the reality is, you got to have an amazing offense, but you also have to have an amazing defense in case the worst case scenario happens. That's the reason why we have this next guest on. We are so excited about diving into it. He's going to be sharing a lot of his case studies, but his philosophy is this: people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. That is his quote that he kind of lives his life by. And he's also, what they focus on is comfortable retirement, really establishing your comfortable retirement, protecting your estate and assets so you can build that next generational wealth, and reviewing a long-term care option and making sure your offense is as strong as your defense. He is currently a partner and wealth advisor at Wealth Enhancement and Preservation. Please welcome my next guest, the one and only Cody Moore. How you doing today, Cody?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Grateful to be here, and I appreciate you having me. That was a better intro than I could have drafted up myself.
Well, Cody, I really appreciate that. And one of the biggest things I appreciate about your background is, and one of the things we were just talking offline, and I really want to kind of bring this up because I think it's very important. In the financial world, there are those Ivy League stuff, right? Did you graduate from Yale, Oxford, Harvard, Stanford, all those things? Did you come from investment banking? Did you work at the big top, investment banking industries and whatever, and then get into the investing world? And you actually took a very unorthodox approach. However, though, in your own right, have become successful. So let me ask you this, Cody, because of that unorthodox approach, but yet you have still achieved incredible stuff. And we'll dive into all the financials here shortly. How do you feel like that has been a positive or a negative in your journey?
Yeah. So I appreciate that. So it's been a positive thing, really, for the most part, getting into this industry and into business overall. To sort of start from the beginning, I started working basically as early as you legally could. Was needed the money to get around, to put gas in the car, just the basics growing up, and worked all through college, paid my own way through college, which is one of the reasons I didn't go to one of the big fancy schools is because they were so far out of the budget that didn't really even come into the picture. And one thing I noticed specifically, exiting college and into the real world is, I could not wait to start my career, had huge goals, big ambition, all these different things. And a lot of my peers were, bummed that college was going to be ending. They weren't going to be able to do whatever they wanted all the time. They were going to be, cut off, all these different things. And I just couldn't wait to get out there. And it was really a blessing in disguise. It obviously wasn't the easiest way to go about things, but I could not have been more excited to get going, get my career started, and to really hit the ground running. So it really was, like I said, a blessing in disguise, and really set me up for a trajectory where I was ready to hit the ground running and make the most of every opportunity I had. There's definitely getting into the financial world. Everyone sort of expects Ivy League or a high-end degree and all these different things. So you've sort of got to build credibility in different ways. But honestly, I think there's only so much to learn. Whether you study it at Harvard or you study it at, let's just say for instance, like an online college or something like that. There's only so much you can learn before you actually get in there and start doing things. And at least for me, I'm a hands-on learner, and there's nothing that could have taught me more, about the work I do and different things than actually just getting out there and doing it. So, maybe I started a step or two back, but I think I've been able to sort of catapult myself forward with some of those things, work ethic, and some of the background that I've had.
Well, with the financial world, it's unlike any other industry where you have to know a lot. You have to know the private markets. You have to know the public markets. You have to know, obviously, the debt instruments and being able to allocate each individual. And it's very contextual depending upon each of your clients. Where unlike where if you're in a consumer business, it's very, or a SaaS business, it's kind of very, hey, we got an idea of what these clients are looking for. And it's kind of a very generic approach, if you will. But this has to be very contextual and has to be very, very customized per individual. deal. So with that being said, Cody, and we'll dive into obviously the financial instruments here shortly and how to look at the way you obviously guys approach your clients. But were some of the pivot points? What were some of the big learning curves or the skills that you had to acquire very quickly to really throw yourself in this world of finance in all these different vehicles, if you will, and learn at a very high level each vehicle and how to leverage it for your clients' use?
Yeah, yeah, great question. So there's unbelievable amount of nuance in the financial world, from the investments you spoke about, debt instruments, alternative investments. Obviously, just the stock market can be complex on its own. Insurance and all that world, and as complex as that is, and best ways to use it when it makes sense, and things like that. So there's so much to learn, and a lot of the background, getting my degree in finance and things like that taught me a lot of sort of the building blocks, the initial foundation, and then a lot of study through the licensing exams and things like that, as well as just learning on your own. You've got to make sure that you're an expert on things, and when you're going in to make sure that you're advising somebody correctly on their life savings and the future for their family. So a lot of things you need to understand, but I found also that the relationship aspect was just as important, if not a little more important than knowing everything all the time. I found that as long as I got to know clients, one of the biggest reasons I came into this business is I was in the technology world before, in big corporations and sales programs and things like that, and you've got your product, and you got to make sure that whoever you're talking to, you can force that product to fit into whatever they need. And building relationships with people that way, I just didn't really enjoy forcing things like that. I really enjoyed building long-term relationships with people, and didn't feel right about trying to sell somebody a product that wasn't the best fit for them. So long story short, the relationship side of things is where I've really enjoyed, where my passion comes from in this business. And I think it's great to know everything all the time, and especially starting out, it's really impossible to know everything that a guy who's been in the industry for 40 years knows. But if you find out everything you can about a client, you really get to know them, their family, their parents, their kids, all the different aspects of their life. Then you can take that and make sure you find something that's the best fit for them. And then getting into the industry terrified me to not know something in a meeting, which turned out that hardly ever happened. But like everything else, it's okay to say, you know what, I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but I'll find out for you right after this. And so that's the way I went about it, getting into the industry with so much wealth of knowledge needed.
So it's a relationship aspect, and that you rely on tremendously, and having those conversations, but also it's humility. You mentioned something I want to kind of double click on, where you said you don't want to just find an asset and it's like, oh, I'm going to get a lot of good commission if I obviously sell this. It's really saying, hey, is this the free frame is to say, hey, is this really logical for this vehicle to be
Right.
allocated toward this client? And that sounds to me, you guys' approach holistically for each client. Is that correct, Cody? I'd love for you to unpack that a little bit further.
Yeah, you're exactly right. My goal, especially being on the younger side, is I found, thankfully, an industry and a job that I can come to work and be excited about, and have passion for, which I think is really unique in this day and age. And so, being able to do that, my goal is 20-year long relationships. So if I, don't make so much day one, and I can make sure that, 5 years down the road, a client can look back and be like, you know what, we made the right decisions. They're in a good place. And you take that more long-term approach. The reality is, over time, you don't, it's sort of you skip the instant gratification of a big commission check, but that long-term, you can sleep good at night knowing that you've done the right thing for a client, and that, over the next 5, 10, 15 years, that they're going to be with you long-term, and you got to continue to earn that business, of course. But, I'm really looking to, in our firm as a whole, which is one of the main reasons I decided to join this firm specifically, is that long-term approach, and really caring about our clients and taking that more high-level service with them than some of the, more volume-based shops that are out there.
So I want to dive into a little bit about your guys' methodology and your approach, because one of the things that I found, everything is so contextual when you're in this industry. You have to ask these certain questions, and what I've discovered is a lot of our audience they do very well. They love making money, right? They're successful at building and scaling businesses, and that's the reason why they listen to this podcast. But now they come over here and they want to, okay, they got distribution, and they don't know exactly what questions to ask in regards to where they should put their other resources to be able to obviously grow or preserve that wealth. And the questions to think about
Mhm.
how to structure it properly as well. And like we just talked about, defense. I think defense is something that very few people are very aware of, or like developing the right instruments or the right things to make sure that you are playing defense in the proper manner. So Cody, I love to start with the methodology and your approach and maybe the questions, or when you're onboarding a new client and you're asking the right questions and you're identifying where they want, and then reverse engineering, and then obviously building out the strategic plan, the tactics to deploy that to get to that destination. I'd love for you to unpack that for us.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're probably familiar with the scenario, but I can't tell you how many people will talk to me, friends, family, others that will be like, "Hey, I've got 100, 500,000. I've got a business sale. I'm going to come into a few million, whatever it is." And they're like, "What should I do with it?" I'm like, "Okay, well, if you go to the doctor, do you just stand there and say, 'Hey, can you prescribe me what I need?'" They're like, "What?" It's the same situation. I totally get where people are coming from when they say it, but we really try to just start from total scratch. Like, it's great that you have that coming in, but we got to figure out this whole picture first, where everything's at. And like I said, we typically, for a new client, we've even had some folks that are referred, and they're were spoken of highly by the person. They're like, "Yeah, I was so excited to meet with you guys. Like, where do I sign? I can't wait to start working with you." And we're like, "Hold on, take a step back. We got a 3 meeting process at minimum to make sure that we unpack every single thing that's going on and understand the full picture. Same thing as a doctor with your diagnosis. He's got to know all your vitals, every single detail. X-rays, MRIs, all these different things. Before being able to diagnose exactly what's going on. So same thing here. So we try to really get to know every bit of somebody's picture, all the different aspects of what's going on, and make sure that whatever they're going to do, with whether it's a windfall from a business sale, or just extra money, or it's just building them a plan to achieve retirement, that every little piece is in place. So we typically will, like I said, do a deep dive, get that put together, and look at everything. And then our team, we have 5 advisors on our team and a chief portfolio manager. So we'll all get together and look at plans and situations for clients, analyze all the data, and put together financial plans and things like that for our clients. On the defensive side of things, we manage money a little bit differently than a lot of folks out there that are just sort of buy and hold, get your mutual funds, and just ride on for 20 years. We try to take a more tactical approach. So we still do have our strategic portfolios and things like that are your long-term buy and hold, your good blue chip stocks, things like that. But we also have a piece that we adjust to current market conditions. So it's a sailing and rowing philosophy, sailing being that more strategic buy and hold approach. And then the rowing, like this last year when things are going, poorly in markets, bonds are down for the first time in 40 years with interest rates finally rising. It doesn't make sense. You've probably seen to be in a 60-40 portfolio, or even your client who's in 20-80 portfolio, and they need to be more conservative. We take a more tactical approach to that, and don't just sit in things like bonds last year when it didn't make sense. So that's sort of how we try to play defense. Another aspect on the planning side to that is we'll try to make sure that clients have everything established. Some clients want to be more aggressive, but we like to know, makes total sense to take a huge risk on something if you've got everything in place. You've got your savings, your emergency fund, you've got retirement set up, you're already saving towards that, you've got enough income in retirement locked in. Then if you want to go, invest in a startup and it's super high risk, well, the reality is when you're looking at all the pieces of the puzzle and you're taking a ton of risk with this one piece, well, it's not really super high risk. You're diversified across and you're safe in a worst case scenario. So we always try to sort of take that outlook on things. Let's plan for the best case scenario. Let's plan for the worst case scenario, and let's plan for what is reasonable to happen.
So when you're talking about onboarding, I love this where you have this approach. I love this diagnosis, right? It's just a great analogy with the doctor where, hey, we got to take your vitals. We got to, identify what's going on exactly. And it doesn't matter if you visited just 2 days ago, we got to redo everything because again, it's the whole concept. Hey, 2 days are drastically different. So you might have, what's your blood sugar? What's this? What's your heartbeat? All that stuff. And so I
Mm,
love that analogy, by the way, because that really builds out that foundation and then that doctor is able to really analyze what's going on, where what path should we obviously identify and go from there.
mm,
Now, with that being said, Cody, you've obviously worked, and your partner, you guys have worked with hundreds of different clients. And I just want to ask you, from the people that you've talked with thus far that have come, and they've come from W-2, from high net worth to ultra high net worth to business owners or whatever, right? So all different kind of across the spectrum. With that being said, get a heartbeat. I'd love to get a heartbeat of what have you seen thus far in regards to the average individual that's part of your clientele in regards to the front end. Do they have access to that information? Are they like, I don't even know where all this stuff is, and oh, I didn't even know I should have this information, or maybe I have a life insurance? I don't know, right? Is there a lot of questions that are uncertain, or do they a lot of them actually have a pretty strategic plan already established, and they kind of give it to you, and it's like, oh, cool, and you can build upon that. Where are they at? I'm just curious from what you have seen, and I'd love to just get a heartbeat of your
yeah,
clients and just the people that you work with.
yeah. So I wish I had one clean, concise answer for you, and could just stay short and sweet to the point. But it really varies. You'd be shocked at how many people have been incredible at earning money over their career, and don't have the slightest clue what an IRA is, or how to invest in the stock market, what a bond is, all these different things. And then there'll be some folks that come in and they've got it on a spreadsheet, and we essentially could just skip a meeting and be like, okay, well, here's all the data, just take it up and analyze it. And so it really varies. I will say one thing that is really common that we see for folks who've been high earners, they might have a multi-million-dollar net worth, is that these days, day and age, with so much information out there, a lot of folks are doing a good job saving for retirement. Sometimes on accident with their 401k or something like that through their employer, but they might be 45, 50, 55 years old, and they've got a few million in a retirement account, and they're good to go. They could achieve their, what we like to call, we shoot for a more work optional lifestyle than a retirement date. We found if you just stop doing, then you just start deteriorating immediately. So most folks, it's better to just sort of get to that work optional stage, and then not have to work for a dollar, but work because you want to, and find something you're passionate about, things like that. So a little tangent there. So we found that folks are at that work optional, date already, but they can't touch their retirement accounts till 59 and a half. So that's a really common thing we found with clients is a lot of folks these days are really doing a good job saving for retirement, but they don't have that liquid bucket to be able to actually take advantage of the wealth that they've accumulated and be able to get to that work optional stage. So that's a really common thing that we're trying to make sure that clients, we meet with that have done a really good job saving for retirement, is making sure, they've got a liquid bucket that they've been saving and investing in to help grow their wealth too, to complement the retirement funds.
That's actually a really good point, actually, because I was going to ask you a little bit in regards to like, are there certain phases that you like to see kind of each client? I know it's contextual dependent upon obviously each individual's case, but I would imagine there are certain phases before we start investing into alternative investing and real estate and all that stuff. We want, XYZ established and put in place. And before we start even developing that, maybe in parallel, we want to start developing the insurance plan and, covering for your business and covering for yourself and your family, et cetera, right? So there's certain phases that you want to hit and in pillars before you start looking at, like you mentioned, having a liquid fund and et cetera, et cetera. So if you could, I'd love for you to just kind of share that a little bit, build that foundation out, what you'd like to see. Again, I know like the numbers, the metrics would be like contextual depending upon that client, but overall the phases I
Right.
would imagine are very, very similar in that methodology, that process. So yeah, I'd love for you to share us what you guys do.
Yeah. Yeah, so I personally like to see. I use the analogy of like building a house, which apparently is a really common analogy in our industry. So I won't act like I'm recreating the wheel here or anything. But I like to see first that your income is exceeding your expenses. I mean, that's the first place to start. That's these days it's not, especially clients that are wanting to work with us and are looking further into it. They've got at least that much of a grasp on their finances. But that's a good place to start. You can use a mint.com or something like that just to track that and make sure that you're tracking on all right to do that. Then we like to see, get that foundation in place. Get your savings, get like a month's worth of income in your checking. Just keep it super basic. Get your emergency fund set up 3 to 6 months. Everybody is pretty familiar with sort of that Dave Ramsey type strategy. Get your emergency fund in place. I like to have a separate account to start building that liquid wealth and just to have it for emergencies. You just the more I've been in this industry, the more I've been around, the more I've realized that you have no idea what's going to happen. It's always good to just have some extra money set aside. You've got, like I said, you've got your emergency fund for emergencies, but be able to save some outside of that, in a liquid account just to have access to for who knows what could happen. From there, I think the sort of to wrap up a good foundation is to just get some term insurance. If you're 20, if you're 30, and you've got, you're starting a family or you've recently gotten married, go ahead and grab 20, 25, 30 years worth of cheap term insurance and call it a day. Ignore the phone calls from all your friends trying to sell you a whole life. That's just my 2 cents. And just get that until you don't need it really. So, once you've got a significant amount of wealth built up, unless you really just want to have extra money, 500,000, a million, or a couple million to leave to your family, you don't need it anymore. I just like to use the term insurance just to make sure your family's taken care of, and vice versa. If something were to happen to your spouse, even if they're stay at home, you're going to need some income replacement to help with the different things that you're taking on with taking care of kids and stuff like that. So that sort of wraps up a strong foundation in my mind. And then from there, of course, you be contributing to retirement. I think for folks in our age range, Social Security is sort of we'll see. I don't know if Social Security is still going to be around or if it'll be as significant as it is today, at least by the time we get to retirement. So good to at least plan, as I mentioned earlier, for let's call it a worst case scenario. Social Security's not there. You got to fund it all yourself. So get your retirement accounts going, at least be contributing, maxing out the match at your employer, and then make sure you're contributing at least some to a liquid investment account. If you've got don't have the funds at the time and you're knocking out all those other pieces, that's fine. But try to get something going to a liquid investment account to grow that as you're going forward. And then from there, if all those boxes are checked, you can have fun. You can take some risky investments. Invest in your childhood friend's startup that he just called you out of the blue for, or whatever the case may be. If you want to start a small business on the side, or you want to throw money at Bitcoin, whatever it is, you can feel confident knowing that if it all goes to zero, you're set, you're good, you're safe, you're taken care of at the end of the day.
That makes sense, and because I mean, really comes down to I love what you're saying. You obviously need to make sure that you have more money than the month, right? That basic concept. You need to have some, runway, basically emergency. So in case something happens, something, obviously we saw tech field right now. They're laying off quite a few people. That's something that a lot of people can't control, et cetera. So you got to make sure you have income to be able to do that, and then of course maxing out those retirements. That's another phase. Just the 401ks, the whatever, the Roth IRAs, et cetera, et cetera. And then obviously getting into the alternative investing space, whether that's actually buying your real estate yourself or getting into private equity or venture capital, or like you mentioned, other different strategies. Now I want to ask a little bit about the liquid bucket. This is what I find interesting. I'm very familiar with the emergency side of things. However, though, do you guys have like another liquid bucket in circumstances like this where we have seen at a macro level a lot of very wealthy individuals, and definitely the private equity. Everybody's sitting on dry powder right now because we don't know where the economy is going, et
Right.
cetera. But at some point, they're going to deploy a lot of capital. The capital is just sitting on the sidelines until things kind of settle down. Once they do, then they're going to go out there and be sharks and buy up some incredible offers and so forth. I see that as a potential liquid where you want to be liquid and to have some cash to be able to
Right.
deploy and take effective measures and take advantage of circumstances like this, right? So, do you guys structure it where you do have two different buckets? One for emergencies, one's put it into a money market, whatever, and then have another one where it's like, hey, this is for potential investment opportunities, whether that's real estate, whether that's that VC, whether that's that private equity, et cetera. How do you guys approach that um, um, in,
Yeah.
in regards to that conversation?
Yeah. No, great question. I appreciate you helping me clarify that. So yeah, we'll typically, we'll even just find a good money market savings rate, savings account, especially these days with money markets being about 4.5% and climbing with the Fed raising rates. And just park it there, let it grow, let it be safe, don't take any risk with that emergency fund. And then a separate account, like you said, yeah, liquid, individual joint account. That's a taxable investment account versus your non-taxable or tax-deferred retirement accounts for situations such as you're talking about. If you lose your job and you've got enough saved up to be able to live for 6 months, in a recession where we just don't know what's going to happen, and then you've got money set aside to be able to take advantage of markets being down and everybody hurting, then you're in a phenomenal position. I've seen some of the craziest success stories from people who just, like you said, sat on dry powder during the 2008 2009 recession and were able to take advantage of what was going on and have done phenomenally well. But you got to be really wise with your money to be able to be in that position. So that's where having that liquid bucket is so helpful to have, because you could be sitting on 500,000, a million, 2 million in your retirement funds, but if you're going to take a massive hit to take that money out plus the 10% penalty, and it's not really, you're gonna have to find Bitcoin at $1, 10 years ago to get make sense of using funds like that, So yeah, that's a really great point. You're in a phenomenal position if you can have some excess cash to be able to take advantage of markets that we're likely headed into.
Definitely, definitely. I appreciate that just clarification because I was just curious on a personal side. Now, also, we've seen right now the private alternative investing world is drastically increase. It's a beautiful market right now. Like I mentioned, definitely in the private equity, there was like $4 trillion, 2025, 2026. They're expecting to like $8, $9 trillion to be deployed and infused into that. That's also including a
Mhm.
little bit of the VC world. We've seen a massive ramp up. Obviously, things are slowing down. There's dry powder. So at a macro level, now this is really specifically targeting accredited investors, which are some of our listeners. They're running
Mhm.
at that top line kind of businesses, and they're given these opportunities. They do have access to deploy capital. So I want to ask you in regards to after developing all those phases, and then we start kind of really focusing on okay, now we're going to grow it. Now we've got the preservation, we've got the foundation, we've got sustainability. Awesome. Now it's a matter of growth for generational, right? And that's where kind of the conversation gets a little fun. But I want to ask you guys, ask Cody yourself, how do you guys look at that or approach that next phase, which is obviously, again, it is just for accredited investors and those that are able to take advantage of it. But I just want to ask how you guys approach that with your clients in that conversation. Because again, even within that alternative investing, there's a ton of different vehicles, and you got to obviously be knowledgeable in regards to how these vehicles work and operate.
Yeah. Yeah, great question. That is where it really, really starts to get fun, and you get to start to do the more exciting things. So, yeah, once you're past that point and everything's established, and you're ready to, you can take some risks like that, and we love being able to do that. Our philosophy is to really be an outsourced CFO for our clients. So that's where we can really partner with them and use our expertise from having done it with hundreds of clients and taken a look at all these different investments. We've got access to hedge funds, private equity, all these various different alternatives. That's where we can really take a look and be like, okay, you know, personally, what are you looking for? What excites you? I've got a client that just knows he needs to invest in stock market, but loves real estate, loves being able to put his hands on stuff. And that's his personal, thing, prerogative. And that's what we like to look at and go over with them. And so he'll find deals. We'll look at them together. We'll look at the numbers, see if it makes sense, all those different things. So that's where we can really start to get into what we're really specialized in the investment management, and start to take a look at a lot of different fun things and really just see, for each individual client, of course we can put together, a package of some exciting things that make sense and put money in a few different ones and things like that. But that's a fun time to like really sit down and be a true partner to clients and take a look at what excites them and find some really fun things for them to take a look at.
Let me ask you in regards to, because within the alternative investing space, you have, like I mentioned, kind of different vehicles, and that's private equity, venture capital. You've also got, natural resources. You also have different opportunity
Mhm.
zones, and then you also have real estate. Real estate is very well known, and obviously the wealthy, influenced individuals, just because it is a very advantageous strategy for taxes, of course, mitigating those taxes. And however, though, in regards to internal rate of return, IRR, private equity beats it almost by like 2 to 1, which is incredible, right? Now, again, I'm not saying that it's not a bad strategy. It's just how do you think about it in regards to your whole portfolio structure? So that's really my approach in regards to this next question: is how do you guys approach that? Is it like, hey, just like you mentioned in regards to that one client, hey, his prerogative, he loves real estate, that's it, wonderful, he knows and he loves it, and the reality is, even if there is private equity that could obviously grow substantially in regards to rate of return, you guys may not add that because he may not be familiar with it, and he may be out of his repertoire of expertise, and that's okay. So I'm just curious how you structure it. It's not always about just like
Yeah.
the metrics. It's also about maybe like, hey, how comfortable are you in deploying capital or infusing capital into different instruments that could get a really good rate of return, but maybe you're not as familiar. I'd just like to get your response on that conversation, on that dialogue with your clients,
Yeah.
and for our audience.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing we really try to do is not so much talk at clients and, tell them what we know and what they should be doing, but really educate them on how things work, and why they should invest in things, why it makes sense to do this, maybe why it makes sense to diversify for that specific client that I was just talking about, why it makes sense to be invested in markets and things like that, and not just funnel everything into houses and real estate and things like that. So we first like to educate them in that scenario. We want to make sure that they understand all the ins and outs, and if they really, at the end of the day, we like to say that we're the quarterback, but they're the GM, they're the owner of the company. So if they just decide like it's, they understand all the ins and outs and the nuances of it and they get it and they just aren't interested in it, totally fine, we don't have to do it. But in a situation like that, we would make sure to sort of urge them to like, let's deploy a certain amount here. This is why it makes a lot of sense to do. If you want to, continue down a real estate path, or, whatever else it is that excites you, that's great. But, take a look at this and all the numbers around it and various different things, and just really try to educate them on why it makes sense. And then, of course, we just, like I said, aren't going to push somebody into an investment that they don't totally understand and are comfortable with, because we're going to put our foot down and this is just what you got to do. So that's sort of the approach we take to it. We have a really personal relationship with our clients as we try to. So that's typically our approach.
That makes sense in regards to like just having that conversation and that educational approach where, hey, you know what, maybe you're not familiar with this vehicle over here, but hey, this vehicle could get you to that goal that you just mentioned a little bit quicker, and
Mm.
maybe you're not too familiar with it. Let me educate you on how that we're going to approach it, obviously, et cetera, and potential return and the risk tolerance as well. I want to ask you, because you and I know there's been a lot of psychological behavior analysis out, and this is within the last 10 years, and how obviously it corresponds in regards to the markets, in regards to obviously our decision making process, and how emotion and behavior actually gets in our way of being able
Mhm.
to stick with a plan, stick with a strategic approach that obviously maybe your client has with wealth managers like yourself, Cody. So I'm curious. how do you guys mitigate that to ensure that, hey, you know what, we've got this amazing strategy, but then all of a sudden, that behavior of that client may obviously offset that strategy that you've obviously effectively deployed, and no, we will get the result, but it's just a matter of, hey, making sure that we stick with the path, because obviously there's uncertainty right now in the market, and there's going to be uncertainty in the future. And so that's why this is, I think, could be a very evergreen approach in regards to how you guys approach that. Love to get your response.
Yeah, so we really try to be, like I said, start with education and educating clients, and we try to be data driven. So we're gonna obviously look at a client and their risk tolerance, what they're comfortable with, if they even need to take that much risk. If they've built up, if their goal is just retirement and they've built up a great nest egg, they've got a few million, they've got what they need, and sometimes it's even coaching folks down from being like, you don't have to be as aggressive as you are in order to achieve your goal. Sometimes it's like, hey, a 6-7% return gets you well and above your goal for retirement, and we don't need to take that much risk. That's actually a kind of a funny conversation I recall having recently with a client who was already at a good place. But really, the way that we manage money is we take all the emotion, and we even take our own sort of opinions off the table. So we have a investment committee that meets every 2 weeks, and we go over everything that's going on, performance, all our different investments. We take a look at things. But when we're shifting things real specifically on the tactical side of our investments, we aggregate research from tons of different companies with big 1,000-person analyst teams. And we have over 80 different indicators that all feed into an algorithm that spits out a number between 4 and 40. 40 being, the most aggressive, 4 being the most conservative. And that is how we are able to shift with market conditions. And so being able to look at that, all the indicators in the market and the economy and everything that's going on, that we're able to take the emotion out of it. And we're not going to be sitting there saying, I read an article online and oil looks like it'd be a good trade for this week. We're not doing that type of investing. We're we're data driven. We're looking at what has happened, and fortunately and unfortunately, every decision that we make has to be based on past data and what has happened, as well as under the underlying indicators, as I mentioned, going on all across the markets in the world. So those are the approaches that we take. And then when it comes to coaching clients through things like the market last year, how things are going this year, we really like to understand where they're coming from, make sure they feel heard, and at the end of the day, go with the direction that they decide to choose, but really educate them, show them the data, show them hard numbers, not just our opinion on things. Be like this, walk them through why XYZ makes sense, and it might be hard or be tough emotionally, but looking at the big picture, this makes the most sense for you.
It's a really good approach, and it's like a good bounce board, because we have to realize our own kind of weaknesses and our own biases and our own behavior. And those clients, you're able to, I've seen numerous people where they're golfing and they're talking to their buddies, and oh yeah, we got, I'm investing in this company, and then they're able to come to you, Cody, and your partner, and be able to bounce this idea off, and then you guys look at the data and say, well, maybe it may not because of this, and we're not going to tell you what to do, but just by showing you the data, this is what the data is telling us, and then obviously exemplify that and share that with your client, and then people can make a more of a logical decision based not just on emotion. Well, my buddy Frank that I golf with, he's doing it, so I appreciate you sharing that, because
Right.
it's the more we become aware of our own behavior weaknesses, the better we become at obviously preserving that wealth and not making big mistakes, because it just takes one, right, to deploy, destroy your wealth and preservation. Cody, I really appreciate you being on here, man, and just unpacking your guys' methodology, your guys' principle, the way you're very relational with each client. And you may not know all the answers, but the reality is you're able to identify and figure out the answers and be a really good bouncing board in a logical data approach, analytical approach, to be able to say, hey, this is the plan, working reverse engineering, and be able to structure that out for the clients, and then be able to use the right tools and the vehicles, and educate them on the different approaches and on how to leverage these vehicles and these leverage points to be able to, obviously build your clients' empires that they all desire and obviously want. For those that want to reach out and be part of what you got going on, you guys have incredible amount of content regards to your market minutes, a lot of different other content you guys have. Cody, how do they connect and reach out if they have more questions, my audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are on, various different platforms: YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Everything is Wealth EP. So Wealth ENP. That's short for our Wealth Enhancement and Preservation name. It's a little easier in conversation to get off the tongue. But yeah, our website is just wealthep.com. Easy way to reach out. We've got our phone, email on there as well. And then folks are welcome to reach out to me as well directly if they've got any questions. Happy to just be a sounding board and not hard sell anybody on anything. Just happy to lend a ear and build relationships from there. So my personal email here is cmoore@wealthep.com.
Awesome. And guys, those links are in the description below. So make sure you stop, what you're doing and obviously reach out to Cody. Cody, I really appreciate making yourself so available when you put your email. So I'll make sure I'll put his email down there as well. So you guys can literally just respond, have a conversation. Again, one of the things that I thought was really interesting, just to loop back on you guys' approach, Cody, in regards to where some clients want to just jump on so bad and they want to be part of your clients, but it's like, hey, let's walk through the 3 steps, right? We have a process for a reason. And again, obviously you guys are very sought after. But the reality is you want to make sure you approach that with the correct resources. So I really appreciate the way you approach that. So again, those links are in the description below, guys. That is my friend, the wealth advisor, as well as partner at Wealth Enhancement and Preservation, the one and only Cody Moore. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Until next time, be uncommon if you can.